Please welcome to the stage guest moderator Karen James from IndieWire, actor Hugh Dancy, and director Tanya Wexler.
Thanks for coming. As you can tell from this trailer, there's a lot going on in this film. It's not just a one-note joke movie about the Vibrator, but Tanya, tell us how it evolved. How did you get the idea, and how did it turn into the film that we see?
I had made 2 little films and then 4 little children, and a friend of mine who was a producer said, "I know what your next film is," and I didn't really know what was for dinner that night, and I said, "Oh, really?" And she said, "Romantic comedy about the invention of the vibrator in Victorian England," and I went, "Yes, please, me." So that was it, and just 6, 7 short years later, here we are. Yeah.
And this must have been a crazy idea. Someone came to you and said, "Would you like to play the guy who created the vibrator?"
I'd been waiting for the call, frankly. No, it was very simple. I mean, that's what happened.
What they said?
Somebody said that, and I thought, well, yeah, I guess I probably do. Under the right circumstances, I read the script, I met with Tanya, I liked the tone of the movie that it was trying to strike. So it was pretty simple.
Well, how did you find that tone? Because there are a lot of layers here. I think of it as a comedy of sexual manners, really, set at the turn of the last century, and you have a lot of other elements in there with Maggie Gyllenhaal's character. Tell us about all the other elements that fed into that beyond the vibrator.
I think you probably put it better than I've ever put it. But it's, I always thought of it as a kind of a romantic comedy, screwball comedy. But what's interesting, I think, is that it really is not in the sitcom-y sense, but it is a situation comedy, and that the comedy derives very much from the absurdity of the situation, which really, happened. I mean, we used a kind of screwball comedy plot, but all the historical bits are true. And so really the actors, I think, kind of got it right away that the way to go is to play it straight and let the situation be where the comedy came from, rather than mugging or pulling for jokes or anything. And for me, that's exactly what I had hoped for. And so we just cast really good people, and they did all the work, and I chilled out.
And your character is based on an historical figure, correct?
Yes, Mortimer Granville really did invent the vibrator. Although I discovered recently that having done that, once he realized what he'd done, he then tried to remove it from women. He thought it was like too dangerous a thing he'd created. So he wasn't, perhaps as enlightened as the version that we portray. And actually, that said, my guy at the beginning of the movie, he's a very, he's idealistic young doctor. He believes in these forward-thinking medical theories of the time, like germ theory. And he can't hold a job down because he's too dangerous. So he decides, you know what? Screw this. I'm just going to get a steady paycheck, and the first person who'll hire me. And I end up working for Jonathan Price, who is running a clinic treating women for hysteria, and he's doing that treatment manually. And and I sign up, and it's only as the movie progresses that I guess I start to have some idea of what I'm actually doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, your character says pleasure has nothing to do with it. Did they really believe that?
The weirdest thing about the movie, and the funniest thing about the movie, is also the truest, the most factual aspect of the movie, which is that these medical men were performing this treatment in the belief that the women were suffering from hysteria, which was really, any woman that was unhappy, which in Victorian England, as you can imagine, was like quite a few of them, was essentially suffering from hysteria, and that she needed her uterus shifted. And bear with me on this, and they would shift her uterus by inducing a paroxysm, which they would do by manually manipulating her, right? And the astonishing thing is that they really believed that. They really believed that, and they weren't. I don't think it was that they weren't in denial. They weren't just putting a nice name to it. That's what they thought they were doing, and that's what Mortimer believes at this point in the film. And
so you had to play the character that way, completely straight. He believes that it's just a nervous release.
That's why the movie is really, I think, very successful as a comedy, because if they knew what they were doing, it'd just be gross. I mean, that's a different movie, and that's fine.
I
But.
think that's an excellent line. We should change the tagline.
It's not gross. And your character has something on his wrist there because he has what we would call
the problem
RSI,
is,
right?
the problem he suffers is that once he joins the clinic that Jonathan Pryce runs, the clinic starts to do very well because he's very good at his job. And he's a young, like, dashing doctor, so the appointment book fills up, and he's treating more and more women, and he develops carpal tunnel syndrome. So at this point it's too late now. I've made the film. At this point in the film, he's wearing like a wrist brace, like a hand brace, to try and give himself some support.
I mean, I think the irony is that the vibrator was invented for a man as a labor-saving device.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then marketed to women.
Yes, marketed to women. But I mean, I think also the women, I wasn't really interested in making a film about victims. Oh, those poor women, being put upon by those doctors. I think the women also, because they didn't have I think the word orgasm was in use, but I don't think anyone conceived of the female orgasm in that way. Freud was mucking about then, but really, because there wasn't a word for women's kind of pleasure on her own that wasn't somehow connected to a man, I think neither party really got the picture,
There's a great line early on in the movie when Jonathan's character is explaining to me he's actually demonstrating what he does with a patient. And he says, like, very off cuff, just kind of passing, he says, of course, as we know, the female cannot experience any sexual pleasure without the actual presence of the male organ. and with that, as that's the explanation, then we carry on. So.
And Tanya, Maggie Gyllenhaal's character, was she always that character an important part of the film, or was that something that came in later in the...
From the very first 2-page description, I can't really use the word treatment anymore, actually, even because everything is a pun in this film.
Yes.
But from the very first description, that Charlotte Dalrymple was already kind of being formed as really the kind of like who I would have wanted to have been if I could have lived back then. I mean, maybe a little bit more contentious and whatever, but in terms of her politics and her outspokenness, she was already, it's really a film about progressives in a way. Hugh's character, Mortimer, is a medical progressive and is kind of, the rest of him is coming along, and Maggie's character is in kind of both the class system and in women's rights and everything, and Jonathan's not so much, and Rupert in electricity. So there's these kind of cutting-edge people looking at all these things that are changing, right? They didn't sit around and think we're quaint Victorians. They thought we're where it's happening. We're on the cutting edge of medicine, and science, and electricity, and women's rights. And so I think what we're watching is this guy who's a kind of a true believer, who kind of becomes a yuppie, essentially, loses his way and finds it again. And Maggie's character is the truth teller in that, I believe.
And you mentioned Rupert. Tell us about Rupert Everett's character.
So Rupert plays essentially kind of like the god brother, to Hugh's character. Hugh's character was the ward of Rupert's parents, and he is a mad inventor and really just obsessed with electricity. And they have this great kind of, I don't know, it's a kind of a comic duo chemistry that they have. And I mean, you'll see they kind of, one night, Hugh has, or I guess I should say Mortimer, has been sacked for the final time, and they just, he's got this horrible hand pain and he's going to lose everything.
Did the actual vibrator that he created look anything like that?
The vibrator's from, I think I should be a vibratologist now, but I think the vibrator's from around kind of 1913 more, looked like that. The Granville's hammer, yes, that's what the first one was called. It just looks like a little black box with a little weird sticky outy bit with a rubber nose. It's not very cinematic, it's kind of boring. So there's some other ones that have more of what we call the hairdryer or gun configuration, depending on one's feeling that day, and power drill, Makita. And it had different nubs, and there were a bunch of different ones that were at that configuration very early on. And there's one in the 1918 Sears catalog that looks a lot like that. And so we just, they have this crazy workbench in there, and I wanted to make it feel like they'd grabbed like a little mini colander and some curly Q thing and, found objects. So they kind of we engineered our own kind of movie version based on about 3 different ones that were out there. So,
And in 1918, in the Sears catalog, how was this advertised? What were they calling it?
I believe it's Home Health Aids Every Woman Appreciates. Yes, and we do. But it went away for a long time because it showed up in a porn film in like the late 20s, early 30s, and so it kind of went much more underground and then showed up as, kind of its origins, a back massager, neck massager. Mm-hmm. But, people are finding, I bought one off of eBay for $60 that supposedly works. I'm not plugging it into my wall outlet anytime soon. That was like from White Cross Electric from like 1915, just because I thought I should have a couple of them, hanging around. And it was unbelievable. It's a, much sturdier kind of thing that you'd find now, I think. I'm not saying anything.
And is it true that you gave the cast vibrators as a gift at the wrap party?
No, at the first day of work.
First day. Oh,
wanted them to be happy.
Research, of course.
It's a happy ending and all, but
it was actually the read through, I think.
Yeah.
If I remember rightly.
I see. So you're all on the same page about that.
Yeah.
And those scenes where you are actually treating your patients are very discreetly shot. And you saw a little bit of it in the trailer with the woman who's singing opera. There's a little red curtain. What's really happening under that curtain? How did you shoot those scenes?
Well, hang on, that's the mystery of cinema right there. Acting is happening under the curtain. No, it's like a little modesty device that we rigged up, not for us, but for, as we imagined that they might have used at the time. So it's got a kind of little pair of red curtains which you could draw back.
I thought we'd give the semiotics folks a long,
Yeah, right, exactly. So yes, it's all very, very delicate and very, very medical.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's a sandbag under there.
Yes, explain the sandbag part.
Oh right. Well, the idea behind the sandbag was that we felt when we were working out before we shot the film, we had a day of rehearsal, and one of the things we had to figure out was how best to use that device and how it would work and where the hand would go, that kind of thing. And one thing that we concluded was that for the sake of verisimilitude, we needed something to apply pressure to. That wasn't an actress.
Although I'm sure you could have found some if you'd looked, right?
And so we settled on sandbags, because there's always a lot of sandbags sitting around on a film set. They use them to weigh the lights down, the stands, and so on. So there was a modesty sandbag there for the sake of, it was, that's probably enough said.
That's a new film term, I think, the modesty sandbag. Right?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
If nothing else.
Exactly.
There'll be a grip that will be just assigned to the modesty sandbag eventually.
Right. And you're on stage now in Venus in Fur, which is a play about sexual power plays. Did this character feed into that in any way, or?
Really not. No.
Yeah,
The tone of the play is so different. The guy I'm playing on stage is very, very knowing, and it's a play about a writer-director and an actress who comes in, and she essentially forces him to audition her for a part that he's written, which she seems totally inappropriate for, and then over the course of the evening, as they start auditioning, they end up in this strange dance together, and she leads him into a lesson about himself in this play that he's written, which is, broadly speaking, about sadomasochism and fetishism. So I seem to have struck in a kind of rich vein in my career recently.
Yes, exactly.
I think that although it on paper appears to have some similarities to this or themes that it shares, it's really very different, I think, if you see them both.
Okay. And Tanya, when you were getting ready to promote this film, was anybody squeamish about it? Were there certain things that you could or couldn't say in the ads, or any kind of taboos that you ran up against?
So far, no. I definitely ask whoever's kind of arranging the interview, like, is this daytime, or what are we talking about? But that actually is one of the things that's kind of surprising, is that we got an R rating when, the women are wearing hats. Right, like they're wearing clothes, hats. No one is in, bad language, no nudity, and it's fine. I don't expect 14-year-olds to come see our movies, so it's not really that big a problem. But I just find it curious that the movie about 12-year-olds murdering each other gets a PG-13. I mean, and I liked that, you know, I liked the Hunger Games. My kids and I had a great time. Oh, God, that sounds wrong, too. But no one is you know, kind of Muslim. I mean, that's the kind of nice part about making an independent film, is you just work with your producers and yourself, and you kind of try to make the best movie you can in your eyes. And I think that's pretty, for all the difficulties it is to get it made, I think that's the best part about making an independent film.
Yeah. And it has a real voice, and even though it's a period piece, it feels very contemporary in some way. How did that come about? What do you think is most modern about the film?
I think Maggie's character is the most modern thing. I mean, obviously the humor is some of the humor there, but she is, you know, she's. It's funny. We used to talk about the fact that all the things, all the kind of the values that she stands for and that she gives voice to in the movie, like, you know, women's rights, basically, but I mean, it's particularly, specifically, kind of women's sexual rights, I suppose, and we talked about how that really wasn't the point of the movie, because we've already surpassed that point. You know, we've got to that point. We know it. It's a lesson for the people in the movie, not the audience. Cut to 2 years later, and actually it turns out not so much. You know, it's still being debated in Congress. It's like, you know, it's a topic of it's in the news. I mean, astonishingly. So I guess that is quite modern. As it happens, like by mistake, it's in the zeitgeist somehow.
Yeah. We have time for some questions from all of you. So if you hold on a minute, people have microphones and they'll take them around.
This question is for Hugh. How did you portray the character of Adam, given the fact that he was a person with Asperger's?
Well, I thought we had a very good script, and I studied the script and I read about the condition. I read several different books, some by people with Asperger's, and some, you know, just about the condition.
Yeah, I have Asperger's, actually. Yeah.
And I met with several people with Asperger's before we made the film, and talked to them, and you know, all people, you know, on the spectrum, and basically I just tried to do as much homework as I could. But the character was described in the script very well. I mean, you know, I thought that when I studied the script, it gave me a really good idea of who he was, and it gave me a really good insight into what that condition is like, which is kind of hard, which was hard for me because it's very different to the way I am. But I ultimately had a really great time doing it. It was a big learning experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other questions?
I got a question for Tanya. First of all, handing out vibrators at the top of rehearsal is the best thing I've ever heard about helping actors find their motivation. But I just found this out about the Asperger's, but it dawned on me that selling a period piece is not very easy, nor is selling a movie that has subject matter like Porky's. But how did you convince people in trying to get the funding and the green light for this to not look at it as that, but look at it more as an empowering piece for women and somebody with Asperger's? Was that difficult for you?
Well,
Just to be clear, the Asperger's, I played a character in a different movie who had Asperger's, a movie called Adam. But I mean, I think that there are enough challenges in this movie that you referred to anyway.
Well, still, taking the Asperger's out, was that difficult for you to get?
yeah, I think really, truly, any independent film is challenging. It's funny because I think the script did a lot of the work for us. I mean, we made sure, the writers and I worked kind of from day one together. It took about 2 years to get the script to a point we felt really, that was, you know, as close to perfect as you can get. And because I'd made 2 really small movies, and while they kind of could show you that I knew where to put a camera, it wasn't something that kind of launched my reputation, and so I needed to kind of go out there and make my case every time. And, you know, you kind of, for us, it was just like, try to get a bit of money, try to get an actor, and we just built the house, you know, one actor, one bit of money at a time. But when the script was done, I kind of read it and went, well, who doesn't want to make this? This is hysterical. This is awesome. And I think you do kind of need both arrogance and naivete. You have to think, of course they're going to make this. And then you have to be dumb enough to hang in there, because it really is a long slog. But I saw it as a romantic comedy, kind of first and foremost, and really kept my sights very clear on that because it happens to be set in Victorian England because of the facts that surround kind of the joke of it, really, which is, for me, that kind of cultural denial. And so, I don't know, we just kept pushing, and I just bugged enough people and drove enough people insane that finally it was easier to say yes to me than to say no to me, basically.
Other questions?
We have time for
Are there-
2 more questions.
2 more questions. Here's your chance.
Hey guys. Hugh, there seems to be like a twitchy energy about the character you're playing. Was that something, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, was that something that you decided to bring to the character because you thought, well, maybe this will work better with the vibe of the script? Or was that just how you believe this person was historically?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I think that you know, for a good part of the movie, he's kind of like a square peg in a round hole. You know, he's in this job and he's trying to convince himself that he's you know, that he's happy, but really, you know, he's settled. He's just settled because he feels like he can't achieve his dreams. You know. And then once he starts this treatment, you know, in that first scene with Rupert, I think at that point I'm kind of in denial about what I'm doing. I'm still insisting to myself and everybody else that it's purely medical, and I'm helping these women, and you know, and I should be very happy about that. So you know, ultimately, as things kind of begin to fall into place for him, and he figures out who he is really and what his values are. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think like the real guy comes to the fore, and by the end he's in a good place. Not to give away too much, but I think that's a fair point. Or it could just be that I was twitchy that day. Thanks.
One more question?
Hi. And you kind of already touched on this about the movie representing female pleasure and sexuality, and it wasn't intended to do so. But do you think when people start to see it, and they kind of see it as a romantic comedy, but they also see the underlying currents of, you know, comparing modern times now and Victorian times of female sexuality, of it kind of picking up that battle? How do you feel about that movie either representing that or not being representative enough?
Go ahead.
I mean, I think I just don't want to lay too much on the shoulders of a kind of entertaining movie that's meant to be a romantic comedy with a little more meat on its bones. I mean, I made the film because I wanted to see the film, and no one else was making it. And I felt like there were movies directed at women that were either really kind of thin and fluffy or kind of broccoli. And I mean, there's some really good films, but I kind of thought, why can't I have something that's entertaining and makes me laugh, that just has some characters I'm really interested in who are struggling with stuff that are my interests? And it was a bit more personal than that. I mean, I hope that people take more away, but what I hope mostly is that they go and have a laugh, basically, because I think it's an empowerment film, but the empowerment is you have to make your own happiness, right? That's what it's in saying, you know, there are serious things and there are fun things, and let's not turn the fun things into serious things by medicalizing them, right? It kind of supposed to be a bit of fun, and it doesn't take a doctor.
Although they are quite talented.
Yes, and handsome sometimes. So.
Well, it is really a wonderful film. I've seen it. You will really enjoy it. And there's a reason these people are so well dressed. They have to go off to the premiere now, so we have to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming,
Thanks, guys.
and thank
Thanks
you
for
all for
coming.
your questions.